I call the Honourable Damien O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'd just like to acknowledge a couple of people. One is my colleague Annette King, who passed over her opportunity to speak on the bill. As former Tourism Minister, I have some views on this and I'd like to express them. I'd like to acknowledge also actually the similarities, in spite of what we've heard from some speakers, for places like the Chathams, for places like the West Coast, for places like Kaikoura, for places like Westland District itself. These are all places, in fact the whole region of the West Coast, 85% of that area is in conservation land. Exactly the same percentage as that on Stewart Island. So the dilemma that the people of Stewart Island, and I acknowledge my colleague Eric Roy, what he is doing for them, is something that I think the country as a whole is facing. The Chatham Islands certainly does. Westland District, the West Coast, Akaroa, there are a number of places around the country wanting to be destinations for tourists, wanting to show off with pride what they have to people who have come from around the world, but struggling to literally pay for that. I thought we could call the bill the National Party wake-up bill. Because what's happening here is that a tax is being brought in and put in place, or the ability to do that. Now, for a party that has always maintained that less tax is good, less tax is better for everyone, if we pay too much tax we'll be ruined, and so they may have learned something from Greece perhaps, because if you don't pay any tax, that's where you end up. This bill brings in one more levy or a tax, or call it what you like, a charge on visitors to Rakiura that is necessary to protect the environment and enhance the visitor experience. Well, the dilemma of how you pay for adequate facilities, as I say, is faced by many councils up and down the country. In fact, I'm not sure what the local government, Minister Nick Smith, will say about this. A council imposing a greater rate or tax. I imagine he might be jumping up and down in his usual manic state, trying to say that rates are all bad, we've got to get them down. The reality is that we need taxes and we need rates spent wisely to maintain infrastructure, to maintain the communities and provide opportunities for industry and tourism. This is one such levy, and Labor supports it. But we've got some fairly ad hoc arrangements. This adds to the smorgasbord of opportunities around the country. There's a couple of airports. I daren't name them, because if the tourism industry was to be true to its word, because it campaigned against a proposal that I put up myself, if it is true that any additional charge will keep people away from our country, then there's a risk that this might stop people going to Rakiura. I doubt it. I confess I have not gone to Stewart Island. I would love to go. This is not going to reduce my desire to go to that wonderful place. Neither will a charge imposed on visitors to this country reduce the desire of them to come here. The important thing is that any levy or any rate or any tax that we gather, that it is spent wisely for the purposes for which it was laid down. And I have to say, I think the Select Committee has done a good job to tidy that up and make sure that it's spent for the right reasons. The member over there should listen. He'll learn a lot more. No, never too late to learn. Never too late to learn. He might look. Can I just ask the government? Can I ask the government whether it will consider, a visitor levy on everyone coming in to provide a fund, so that all the other councils in the country that are strapped for cash, whether they can apply for a fund that provides toilets, basic signage. And I'd just like to take the opportunity now to offer my condolences and apologies to the tourist who came to this country and unfortunately turned the wrong way onto a roundabout and lost his wife as a result. That is a tragic accident that our police, for whatever idiotic reason, decided to prosecute that poor guy. Anyway, he was let off. The point being that I'm guessing the signage that we have around this country was not adequate enough to show that person where he should and shouldn't turn. The point being that we need proper infrastructure to properly protect and look after the tourists that come to this country. That was a tragic accident. We need to make sure there's proper safety requirements, that there are proper infrastructure requirements and environmental protection on Rakiura, and the West Coast, in Northland, in Akaroa, Banks Peninsula, right around this country if we are to uphold the 100% pure New Zealand brand. It is a valuable brand. This levy will assist in upholding that brand down on that wonderful island, Stewart Island, Rakiura. But the question for the government is, are they going to do anything else to try and protect... Is the government going to do anything to try and protect the rest of the conservation estate? Because what they've done is chopped the Department of Conservation budget. They've chopped the budget and they've allowed the Southland District Council to bring in a levy that will effectively do the same or replace the money that they won't have on the island to manage the environment. It's a bit of a merry-go-round, really. And I have to say that the government's got to be a bit more consistent. I appreciate Eric Roy's brought the bill to the House. We support it. We support it because it's a smart and a very good bill. But the principles behind this apply to the whole country. So what are we going to say to the Chatham Islands residents? The few over there who are trying to just generate a bit more tourism, who have incredible natural resources, but have huge costs. What are we going to say to them when they ask us, can you place a levy on either the goods or the services or the visitors coming to our island so we can better protect what we have? Well, I'd suggest we'll have to say yes too. I personally don't have a problem with that. Or what about the West Coast, who say 85% of our land is locked up in conservation estate, a small amount of rateable land, we have to maintain the roads and all the infrastructure. Can we have a levy? And the government and its agencies have said no. They've said all the $500 million worth of coal coming from one mine above Westport, $500 million in export earnings, not a cent goes as of right back to the councils on the West Coast. So we've got some inconsistency right through New Zealand, and all I ask in Labor supporting the bill, that we get from the national government a bit more consistency around protection of the environment, funding for conservation, support for infrastructure, and on the key issue of taxation. We don't believe, and most of New Zealand don't believe, the blind rhetoric that comes from the National Party that reducing your taxes will make us all better off. Well, they chopped $14 billion worth of taxes for the wealthy and then told us we couldn't afford a whole lot of stuff, health and education, and we're supposed to feel better off. Wake up, National Party, wake up. We support this bill, but let's have some more consistency from the national government, particularly from that member who's been in so many different places philosophically and physically, he doesn't quite know where he is at the moment. So, in supporting this bill, Mr. Speaker, can I just say that Labor would like to see more consistency, and I'm sure my colleague, the Honourable Annette King, would like to see some consideration for the Chatham Islands, which they rightfully deserve.
I call the Honourable Member Jackie Dean.